Hi, this is Tim Lightfellow in the Kingdom of Ontario Society for Creative Anachronism. This video is going to be another short one. It's discussing acrylic paints and leather dyes that I've used for arrow making, and just kind of sharing my experience to see if maybe new people to arrow making or trying things out, maybe it can give some information that helps them out. Okay, so to begin with, my mentor taught me for doing back dips on arrows or crown dips, the leather dye works best. So I'll show you a couple quick examples. We have here a nice green. It's interesting because this leather dye actually turns out looking a little bit metallic every time I've used it, even though it doesn't look that way out of the bottle. We have red. This one I actually did the whole body of the bolt in red. We have some, it's going to look blue because of the way it tends to work, but it's actually purple. It's interesting, when I tried to take photos of this, it did the same thing. This all looks blue even though it's purple, and these look blue even though they're purple. And then this one is a medium brown leather dye. And you'll notice on some of these, like the purple, you couldn't really see the grain of the wood, but you notice with this brown, you actually can still see the wood grain through it. Same with the green, and same with the red. So a couple examples of various either full color shaft or back dip things I've done with the dye. So the first one I wanted to discuss is Fibings. They tend to come in this size or larger, especially if you're doing leather work in that, you might buy the larger size of them. And I see I actually grabbed some of the leather work ones. That's edge coat, not dye. So they come in containers like this. I use a dauber to apply them. I do a pencil line around the shaft where I want the end to be. So I'll come up kind of close to it. And then what I'll do is I'll hold the dauber flat for the edge. I'll hold the dauber flat and I'll spin the shaft to just go right around that edge. And it usually gives me a pretty clean edge. It's with wood grain, it's going to creep along it a little bit, but it's been not too bad by doing it that way. Whereas when I was trying to actually brush right up to the edge on each stroke, but as I went around the shaft, it would end up creeping up, quarter inch, half inch or more at times, because of the way the wood grain was and the way it took the dye. So examples of Fibings, that green is a Fibings green, and the medium brown is a Fibings medium brown dye. I've had good luck with that. I've not run into any that I didn't like. The one thing is they do make something that they call low VOC, which is particularly seems to be done for their red. And I've noticed that it seems to be a little harsher smell, to be honest. I end up, the low VOC I have to take out of the house and use it out in the shed rather than having it in the house where people can breathe it. Something I've recently been trying is Angelus leather dye, and it comes in, I think these are actually 3 ounces, so these are a little smaller packages than the Fibings. There's an example right of one. That's the purple. And I figured I'd try these because I've been using their acrylics, and I figured, hey, I like the colors, the way they turn out, so I'm betting their leather dye is going to make me happy as well. And sure enough, And again, it's showing as blue, but this is actually a really nice, almost a royal purple color that I got with the purple, with a single coat of the purple dye. And let's see, I didn't actually grab any other examples. With lighter colors, particularly white, in fact, white, Fibings and Angelus, I have not found a white leather dye. Fibings used to make one. I know my mentor had tried it when they did, and my understanding from his feedback, and if I recall seeing a set that was done that way, is it really ended up looking just like a whitewashed piece of wood. So it didn't really take a white color at all. So his solution for that, and the way I've been doing white back dips since he taught me, is using paint instead of leather dye. I did a set with a yellow back dip. The person wanted hornet colors because they happened to work for a school that had a hornet as a mascot. And so I did a yellow paint back dip and then black and yellow cresting. So whites and yellows, I tend to use paint instead of dye. There was discussion on SCA Target Archery about yellow dye and how it can really make the grain just really pop and be amazing and cool looking. I haven't tried that. I've only ever had the one chance to do a yellow set, and we did paint. So that may be something I get to try and experiment with in the future. So those are the only two leather dyes I've had the opportunity to use. If you've used another and have a favorite one, please add comments on this video. I'd love to see them and, look for more things to try out that might broaden the color spectrum and the products that I can use. That was one thing that turned me on to Angelus, is that Fibings had a fairly strict color palette, and I happened into a leather store and saw some Angelus paints and saw that they had this nice purple, they had this basically royal blue, they had, all these brighter colors that I wanted to try out. And so that's what initially got me started trying the Angelus, and I liked it. I'll go into some details about it in a moment. Moving on to acrylics, what I started out with, and which is probably what a lot of people end up with, is some of this stuff. So you go to your local craft store and you get, what is this, Apple Barrel or Deco Art or Folk Art or one of these brands of acrylic paints. And the biggest challenge I've had with these, well, I'll say there are a couple. Very inconsistent about how much liquid content is in them. So there are a lot of times that I'll have to either add some, thin it a little bit basically to make it spread correctly, or it might clump up a little bit as you're doing cresting, or you end up with them just really watery, and then you're doing, coat after coat trying to get it to cover appropriately. And one thing I've noticed with this stuff is when it dries a little bit thick. And so, not that one, because that one doesn't have it. If I take this and feel across here, the gold was one of these, and I can literally feel each line that I painted, even through the sealant. I'm going to say there are two factors for that. One is the paint, because it dries thicker and you can feel it. The other is that they changed the sealant formula and it dries thinner, and it makes it so it's easier to feel the paints. So kind of a two-piece effect there. But that said, I moved from that to, like I said, I saw in the leather store some of these cool colors of, so they have like a turquoise, a nice gray, there's a nice green, and these are the 1 ounce bottles. They also sell in 4 ounce bottles. So I bought red, and I bought one of the blues in 4 ounce because those are colors I tend to use a lot more of. And what I've noticed with these is, for the most part, they tend to be pretty consistent on water content or liquid content. So they tend to spread pretty much the same color to color. One difference is the white I have seems like it's a little less liquidy. So I actually bought some of their thinner to mix in with it to make it spread better. But that makes it a lot easier for me when I'm doing cresting, if I'm familiar enough with the paint and if they all behave pretty similarly, instead of trying to remember, now when I open that gold, it's going to spread this way, and when I open that white, it's going to spread that way, and trying to keep track of that so that the end product looks like what I want it to. So I like that about these. The other thing I like about these, along with the vivid, like I said, the nice bright color options that you have, is that when I use those, so this one has, let's see, I think the camera's showing it well enough. This has brown, black, and then the lines are actually this gray. And if I do this, I can just ever so slightly feel where the gray lines are. In fact, I can't feel most of them, but right in the middle, I can feel those just a little. So that's one of the things I've really come to like about the Angelus, is it, because of the moisture content in it, when it dries really flat. So it's a really kind of a low profile paint on top of the wood, as opposed to those original acrylics, which you would feel bumps, and especially some of the colors that would go on unevenly, you'd have these bumps even just through a band of the color. You'd feel, bumps in that. And I've not had that happen with the Angelus paints. The trade-off, there's always a trade-off. Those will tend to dry in 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how wide and how thick the paint is. The Angelus generally, if I'm doing the nice thin lines, it'll dry in 15 to 30 minutes. But when I'm doing these wide bands, I literally let it sit at least overnight, because it does take a while to really dry. If you grab it after an hour or so and you touch it, you're likely going to end up with some paint on your hand still, even though you can see that it's kind of darkened up and it's working on drying. It does have a longer time to actually reach dry, so that you can move on and work on the next colors. So that is the one trade-off, but so far, for me at least, it's been really worth it to get that nice low profile and the nice color palette options I get with the Angelus paints. So I think that pretty much covers the types I use and why I use them and some of the benefits and drawbacks. I use, for anyone who's interested, since I was referring to sealant and sealant having changed, I use something called Daly's Profin Gloss Sealant, which tends to really make the colors nice and bright. I noticed at the beginning of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, they changed their formula so that it went from being an amber color to almost a chocolate brown color when wet in the can. And I noticed it was going on a lot thinner. It was taking like 3 coats to do anything instead of 1 or 2. Since then, I've noticed they changed it back somewhat, So it's the amber color again, like it should be, or like I'm used to it being. I don't know if it should be, but it still goes on a little bit thinner, and because of that, you can still feel the paint lines a little bit. Whereas when it was the original stuff that was a bit thicker, with the Angelus you couldn't feel the paint lines, and with the other stuff you would still feel it a little bit. I hope this information is useful. If you have any ideas for additional videos for my channel, please drop them in the comments. If you have favorite products that I didn't happen to mention here, because there are certainly a lot more acrylics out there, and I don't know about leather dyes, if there are more or not. Feel free to drop those in the comments as well. Thank you.